Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Canada Today show on Muslim Network TV. This show is airing weekly on Muslim Network TV, where we highlight insights, challenges, aspirations, as well as success stories of Canadian Muslims. My name is Taha Ghayur, your host, and today we're going to be speaking with a young Muslim changemaker from Ottawa. And we want to hear about her story of activism. Today, specifically, the person I'm going to be inviting to share her story and journey of activism is Yasmine Atassi. In 2018, Yasmine Atassi founded the Arab Students League, whose mission is to further connect young Arab professionals with the Ottawa community through professional development and cultural promotion. As a result of her environmental activism and interests in sustainability, Yasmine launched the fourth chapter of Zero Food Waste Canada, a national organization that tackles food waste and food insecurity by delivering access food to charity organizations. Yasmine has also volunteered with the Liberal Party of Canada for several years and served recently as a delegate during the 2021 Equal Voice Daughters of the Vote program. Yasmine is a current Master of Political Management candidate at Carleton University's of Arthur Kroeger College of Public Affairs. She holds an honors bachelor's degree in communications and media studies and a minor in political science from Carleton University. Welcome, Yasmine, to our show today.
Thank you for having me. I recognize that my program name is a bit long, so.
Well,
but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
It has a lot of good in it, so it's a reflection of a lot of things that you are up to and the potential that you have to serve the community. So thank you, and we want to actually start off by talking about your journey, going back all the way to, I guess, politics back in several years back when you started off with the volunteering with the Liberal Party. Wanted to ask you first, what prompted you to get involved at a young age with the Liberal Party or politics in general at that time, and what was, what's your story and what's your motivation behind it?
Yeah, so I came to Canada in 2016. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and I'm originally from Syria. So I think to answer your question, I think there's three main points. The first one is basically the fact that I come from Syria, a country that hasn't really granted its citizens the right to politically express. So it's almost inevitable that I wouldn't have an interest for politics in a place that grants me that kind of freedom. So that's first. Second is recognizing that we do have a democratic system, but at the same time, we still have a lot of flaws. So, things like the way politics deals with minorities. I had an incident where it was a couple of years ago, and I was asked to remove my hijab on Parliament Hill by security staff. And at the time, I wasn't sure whether it was like an act of aggression or, that person simply didn't know how, the hijab worked. So, recognizing that we still have problems and there's still like a lack of awareness, especially when it comes to religious minorities, was another reason for my interest. And the third is also realizing that we have a very big Muslim population in Canada. In 2017, we had around 1 million Muslims, and it's expected by 2030 to increase by 6.6%. So, when you have such a big number of Muslims, you need somebody to represent them. So I think we need to have more of an active voice rather than passive when it comes to Canadian politics, because we are offered with this kind of opportunity, so might as well take advantage of it.
Well, awesome. I mean, definitely our own personal experiences shape a lot what we do, and I'm glad you brought that up. The idea, the fact that, of course, unfortunately, a lot of countries around the world don't have the kinds of democratic systems that we have, even though we have our own, issues to deal with of discrimination, and you just highlighted one, or sometimes lack of understanding. But the work's got to be done. And so I wanted to ask you, you spoke about representation. why do you think, as a Canadian Muslim and a person who happens to be, of course, a female and who happens to be a hijab observing female Muslim in Canada, why is representation important to you and, of course, to the wider Muslim community and Canadian Muslim community? Why it is so critical?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think, the fact that there's so much stereotyping, wrong narratives that are out there that are, part of Western culture is, places like an individual responsibility on myself to somehow change that narrative. And I actually started wearing the hijab in Canada. So I got to experience Canada without being a visible Muslim, but at the same time, right now experiencing it as a visible Muslim. So I saw the differences. The fact that I went through that change places some sort of individual responsibility on myself to show people that it's all these stereotypes are not necessarily true, and sort of like working to fix these stereotypical images basically.
Interesting. So when you started off, well, let's talk about wearing hijab itself, of course. So what kinds of reactions did you face at the time, whether from the family or, of course, the community out there, or, of course, the political circles or activism circles that you're part of?
My experience was quite good. I've heard crazy stories from other girls, so I don't think it's fair for me to like speak on behalf of all hijabis, especially because sometimes, so I'm Arab and I happen to be, like a white Arab, if that makes sense. So, people sometimes don't talk about this form of white privilege that is also prevalent, not only in, like Western cultures, but also even like in Asia and Africa. So I think my experience is very different than my friend who's also a person of color, and maybe she was Black and she started wearing the hijab in Canada. I think these are very different experiences. But in general, the community was very supportive. Canadians in general, they were extremely nice. In fact, I think their response was even better than that of my own community, like the Arab community, not the Muslim community. So yeah, again, we have a lot of stereotypes. There's a lot of things that we need to work on, but at the same time, I think the inclusive environment that Canada offers is part of the reason why I was encouraged to make that step to begin with.
I want to dwell a little bit more on this because there's so much that comes with your story. And before we talk about some other aspects of your activism and own work, but one thing I was curious to know was, how was the response within, let's say, the Liberal Party or the political circles when they saw a person of color wearing hijab and, of course, confidently talking about or advocating for or just participating in one way or the other? What kinds of reactions you saw there?
I think it was a very positive response. To be honest, sometimes I felt a little tokenized, like, they would like get me out of everyone in the group to like film a video or something because they want to highlight the fact that the Liberal Party is inclusive, which is obviously a good thing. But tokenization was definitely there sometimes. But overall, the Liberal Party is very diverse, and there's so many Muslims, who are either members of parliament or volunteers like myself. So it was, I haven't really faced any difficulties or anything. But then again, that incident on Parliament Hill was definitely something that sparked more of my interest towards actually volunteering in politics and working towards politics. Yeah, I would say overall my experience was quite good in comparison to that of others.
Now, talking about politics and political engagement in Muslim community has come a long way, as we know. Surveys have shown this, and we know from studies and numbers shared by the Canadian Muslim Vote, for instance, have shown that Canadian Muslims have been actually voting at a higher rate, and political participation in elections especially have been at a higher level compared to fellow Canadians out there. However, voting is one thing, and political participation and engagement and organizing and actually getting involved and canvassing and whatever level of political and of course running for the office. I mean, there's so many things that are involved when it comes to political engagement. I'm wondering, have you noticed some level of apathy in the Muslim community when it comes to political engagement? And if yes, why do you think that's the case? I mean, even your own experience when you decided to just go as a delegate, or even before that, in whatever way you were volunteering and engaged in politics, what kinds of I guess negative reactions or barriers you may have noticed, if any, in the Muslim community in particular?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the fact that a lot of Muslims come from countries where, the political system is not perfect, is definitely a reason why there's a lot of apathy. A lot of people are traumatized from things that they've experienced in their home countries. A lot of Muslims weren't really able to politically express, as I said earlier, like, for example, Syrian Muslims. A lot of them, they come to Canada and they're surprised that we even have a political system that's somehow inclusive. So again, personal experiences, as you mentioned before, definitely plays a role. The other thing is, realizing that we're hyper visible. Like if a Muslim candidate were to run, there's more pressure on them. They might get false accusations, again, getting stereotyped. So not everyone's willing to actually take that step to change that process. But the reality is, if we need that to change, we need to have more of an active voice rather than passive voice. Although a lot of people would assume that, I don't want to get into politics because I don't want to be targeted negatively. But the thing is, if we don't take initiative in becoming part of that political sphere, then it's never going to change.
That's beautiful. You're so correct about that. Thank you so much. Now, you have launched a chapter of Zero Food Waste Canada, which is a big shift in your passion. Tell us about their work and what inspired you to get involved with food insecurity issues.
Yeah, so it started a couple of years ago. I took a class on consumer culture, and I realized that we spend so much and we waste so much and we take our resources for granted. And it's even something that's mentioned across the Quran and even in Hadith. We're very consumerist, and when it comes to the food that we eat, the resources that we use, I think we're supposed to take care of our planet, and people are constantly forgetting that. So it started off more as interest towards the zero waste movement in general, which is basically a movement that advocates people to work towards, becoming more of a circular economy rather than linear. Repurposing everything, reusing. So that's somehow how it started. And then I started looking at the issue of food waste on campus. I remember we have around 4 or 5 Tim Hortons, and every single day I saw them throwing away food. And I saw this organization that was operating in Alberta. So I reached out to them and I was like, would it be possible to start a chapter in Ottawa? I feel like it's definitely needed. So I got in touch with them and we started off around 5 months ago. So we tackle 2 things, food insecurity, but also, when you're throwing away food, it affects the environment. The methane gases and everything like that. So, it's helping the environment, but it's also helping the community. And a lot of people are not interested in the environment, but they're interested in helping others and donating to charity organizations. So it's a good way to indirectly involve those who are not as interested in the environment to indirectly become more interested.
So I'm assuming you approached some of these restaurants that you just mentioned, Tim Hortons and some others. What kind of response were you getting from them?
I think it's been a positive response. A lot of restaurants are often worried that they might get sued or something if anything goes wrong. But the nice thing is that all these restaurants do not have legal liability if anything were to happen. The Ontario government specifically has a Food Donation Act that protects these businesses, especially during COVID. Everyone's stressed. They just want to make profit. Their market sales are so unpredictable. So we always constantly remind them that you're still protected at the end of the day, and there's actually more good than bad. We're marketing for your restaurant. Other people are going to see that you're involved. They might be more encouraged to show up to your store. So right now we have around 5 businesses on board. We're hoping to get more and more businesses on board, specifically larger corporations like Starbucks branches. So this is something that we're actively working on. But right now we have more of local restaurants, local grocery stores, even a macaroon store. But hopefully we're planning on expanding very soon.
Amazing. That's great. And I was wondering, you mentioned COVID-19, of course, and the pandemic. So how has, I guess, the direction of food waste changed as a result of the pandemic, with all the restrictions that you have to work with? And I mean, and you, since you started during the pandemic, I wonder what kind of challenges you're facing as a result now.
There's definitely more plastic. Like there are things
Mm.
that were not wrapped in plastic before the pandemic, and now they are. So again, because I'm a zero waste advocate, I try to show to any coffee shop and have my own reusable cup, but I can't do that anymore because of the
Mm.
pandemic. Even when you're sitting at a restaurant, sometimes the cutlery is wrapped in plastic. There's more
Yes.
disposable items that are being used, so that's definitely been a struggle because yes, we're trying to divert this food away from the landfill, but we also have the plastic to worry about. It was great seeing the Liberal Party earlier last year announce that they're planning on banning some of the most used plastics at restaurants. So I think it's definitely a good step towards reaching zero emissions by 2050. But I think, yeah, seeing so much plastic, everyone on the team, we get bothered by this sight, but at the same time, we
Mm.
remind ourselves that we're tackling food waste, and that's still something to start with. And we're also planning on, educating the public, the local public here about plastic use, because a lot of people think recycling is part of the solution. And while it is,
Mm.
it's not enough because these facilities are only recycling not even half of what we're sending to them.
Mm.
Only 9% gets recycled. So it's more about actually also using less to begin with before we even reach the part where we start recycling.
Absolutely, you're right. So right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So how does this program, actually Zero Food Canada, Zero Food Waste Canada program, actually work in terms of delivery to the end users? I mean, how do individuals who deserve this food, for instance, how does that work?
So we try to recruit volunteers and we call them food rescuers. So they would be responsible for delivering the leftover food from the restaurant to the charity organization. And we also keep track of how much food we're saving from the landfill. So like by weight, by kilograms. And at the end of the year, we calculated to see how much carbon emissions we ended up saving. So we definitely rely a lot on volunteers, and it's very flexible. People give us their own schedules, so whenever we have something, we just send out like an email, and we have like a sign up website, and whoever is available, they just put their name in the slot, and they deliver it, and then they take a photo of what they delivered. So it's definitely a good way to get involved as well, especially in this pandemic. It's definitely safe. They have their masks on all the time. They're social distancing, because obviously that is a concern right now in the pandemic. So we always remind them that it's a very safe process. And yeah, like food insecurity right now during COVID has increased drastically. So I
Mhm.
think now is the time to be doing something like this.
That's awesome. And I was just curious, what kinds of organizations typically you work with? I mean, are these like like homeless shelters? Are these relief type of organizations? Just curious to know what kinds of organizations you're working with.
So at the moment, we have two charity or homeless shelters actually.
Good.
One is called the Ottawa Mission. The other one is Shepherds of Good Hope. So
Mhm.
because they're located in downtown, so it's very strategic. We're also trying to tackle the issue of actually driving and using fuel. So we're trying to make everything close to each other, just so we're not defying the purpose of helping the environment. Like we're still making the travel distance shorter than what it's supposed to be. So yeah, right now we only have two homeless shelters on board, but we're hoping to expand to orphanages because that's what they're doing in Alberta. We also have a branch in Hamilton, and the co-founders in Alberta, they've been very supportive. If it weren't up to them, I wouldn't be doing this right now. So
Amazing. No, that's amazing. Great to see the activity there and the potential for growth. And thank you for sharing your story behind it and help us understand why this something like this is so important. And it's doable, because a lot of times we don't realize that these kinds of initiatives, even during the pandemic, are actually very doable. It's just a matter of just having that willpower and thinking out of the box, just taking that initiative. So that's awesome. Now tell us about your work with Arab Students League that you founded in 2018. Why did you feel the need to launch something like this, and what void and or gap you're trying to fill?
I think there was a lack of providing networking opportunities to the Arab community on campus at Carleton University and Ottawa in general. There's a lot of great organizations, cultural organizations that are doing amazing events, and they constantly have fundraisers and all kinds of things. But there wasn't really an organization that does like something like helping out with resumes or connecting a student with a Arab professional in their field. So that's definitely something that I wanted to focus on. And at the same time, we had like a Palestinian organization, we had a Lebanese one, but we didn't really have one that represents everyone, all Arabs. And obviously, Arab identities are very complex. Like you have people in Africa, you have people in Asia. So I just wanted to somehow create like a unifying environment for everyone, while at the same time staying away from politics, staying away from discussing religion and all that, just so it's more inclusive. Yeah, it's been great. Like, it's been 2 years, and we've actually done an environmental awareness campaign just because I wanted to merge these two interests into one place, and especially because a lot of Arabs come from Arab countries where recycling, reusing, and all that, and reducing is very taboo. So we wanted to shed a light on that issue and, change that narrative on campus. So we ended up getting a Shopify business to campus to sell their eco-friendly products, such as reusable cutlery, plastic, bamboo straws, and all kinds of things. So, and there was very good response from the Carleton community. We've also done things like trips, like off-campus trips. So there was focus on networking, but there's also focus on actually creating a space where people could meet each other, because I myself, like, I came in 2016 not knowing anyone in Canada, and I definitely needed that support. So I wanted to provide it to other people as well.
Amazing. I mean, it's a beautiful story of somebody like you who came to Canada about, let's say, 5 years back. And mashallah, you've been involved with so many leadership activities and leading community in such amazing initiatives. So thank you so much for your leadership and inspiration. And that leads me to a question about what I guess, what are some barriers? And it doesn't have to be just you and your personal story, but what are some barriers that young women like you and who happens to be, of course, Muslim and hijabi on top of it, face in areas of activism in general? What are some barriers and obstacles that they face and that need to be addressed in future, of course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, going back to this idea of trauma and going back to what people experience in their home countries kind of like shapes their identities in Canada. So I think for a lot of Arab Muslim parents, at least I want to speak on behalf of my group, because I think it's very different from person to person. A lot of people just, they try to stay away from politics because that's what they're used to doing. And they don't realize that it's a very safe democratic system here. So I think changing that narrative and making them realize that it's not like how it used to be in their home countries is definitely a big one. Another challenge, I think, is, again, I'm a visible Muslim. So there's definitely more responsibility that comes with that. You're gonna hear more comments. You may have to work twice as hard to prove a point. And that like, even as a white woman, that's a struggle. So imagine what would happen if we're adding hijab on top of that, Muslim on top of that, Arab on top of that. There's so many layers, this whole concept of intersectionality. So, and again, things like the wage gap. Women are still getting paid less than men. I have a master's degree right now, and I'm still going to be paid less than my male coworker. So we definitely have to work twice as hard. But that's not a reason for us not to, try to fix that gap and make it more equal in the future.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's unfortunate, and I hope things do get better as time, as more people like you, of course, advocate for such issues and are visibly, of course, there on the table doing things as the way you are. Well, a couple of more questions I wanted to ask you related to this. I mean, one being your advice to young women, again, like yourself, who want to start off doing something for the community, something good. They want to make the world a better place. They want to play some sort of leadership role, or just being a voice for the underrepresented represented communities, like the Canadian Muslim community, or Canadian Arab Muslim community, or Canadian African American, African Muslim community, or whatever their identity, mix of identities looks like, and their intersectionality that we just talked about. What advice do you have for those who just want to start off somewhere? Where should they start, and what are some of the considerations that they need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think something that I always stress on is that volunteerism, community engagement, like you're doing it for free, but there's so much reward at the end of the day, because there's going to come a time where you're going to need that community support. So it's a very transactional relationship. Like it's you're doing it for the community, but you're also doing it because you like for yourself as well. So I always push for volunteerism, even if you're not getting paid, even if you're working a lot and you feel like you deserve to get paid. So that's one thing. Another thing is reach out to people who are doing something similar. Like I've reached out to so many women that are passionate about the same things. So keeping that very tight network of people around you is definitely good. Don't hesitate to have a mentor. Like just reach out to someone that you're interested in, like in their work, and ask them to be your mentor. Have like monthly meetings, weekly meetings, whatever works out for the other person. Because I think if you don't have like a very strong community around you that supports what you're doing, you're not going to be as encouraged to take on that change, or start that organization, or become more politically involved. Because I remember when I started volunteering for the Liberal Party, I would show up alone. I didn't know anyone in the campaigns or anything. So obviously there was some sort of anxiety there. And I think it would have been much better if I had a friend who tagged along to those experiences. So again, finding someone who's into the same things you're into, and encouraging each other to work on that goal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is amazing. I wanted to ask you actually something. It made me think about something you just said about finding a mentor. And typically mentor is somebody who's older, or at least more experienced in the field. I wanted to hear your thoughts on, I guess, the intergenerational gap that we see, especially I notice in the Muslim community, but the wider world of activism as well, where young people are often not interested in, connecting with or learning from, or even working under somebody who's older, sometimes maybe, significantly older, maybe their fathers, their parents' generation, mother's generation. How do you, first of all, what are your thoughts on this? And how do you think we can make it a healthier relationship so that we are gaining from the wonderful wisdom and experiences of our elders, and at the same time ensuring that our younger generation's energy is being channeled in a way that is productive and not sort of wasting the lived experiences of our elders who have been there, done that, can of course easily something that can help them go in a direction that is going to where we're going to make less mistakes, let's put it this way. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on this.
So I think this is where like the older generation plays a role. They need to be more welcoming. Like they need to show the younger generation that they're there to, like, they're willing to have a conversation. So for example, again, I talk about LinkedIn a lot just because like everyone's on it right now, and I've met so many amazing people through that network. So I think a simple status update from an older person from the older generation, saying something like, if you're looking someone for career help, or if you're just looking to have a conversation where I could have an active role, I think the younger generation might be more encouraged. I think what's going on right now is that a lot of people my age just assume that that person is not willing to help them, and therefore they're not really planning on reaching out to them. But if the older generation also shows that, we're also reveal that they're willing to help, I think there would be more engagement, and we'd have less of that gap that you're talking about.
Very practical advice. Thank you so much. I wanted to now talk a little bit about your personal motivations. Uh, what keeps you going on a daily basis when you wake up in the morning? What is it that excites you, motivates you to continue doing the wonderful work of activism and volunteerism and humanitarian work that you're doing?
That's a great question. Again, I talked about, like the three main reasons why I have a passion for politics to begin with. And that is, realizing that there's a gap in the representation and that we still have flaws in the system. And again, I think one of the biggest things is looking at what happened to relatives of mine in Syria or anyone who tried to speak up. It's just like so surreal to be like walking across Parliament Hill every single day and even bumping to ministers or politicians and realizing that this is a very transparent and safe environment. So I think that alone gives some kind of rush that I'll never know how to explain. The other thing is also like realizing that I myself and other people my age are trying to make a difference. And when we actually see it pay it off, I think is definitely like another reason, especially when we actually see the food that we're delivering, for example, from food waste to actually get delivered somewhere and put a smile on someone's face. I think those two reasons are like the main reasons why I just keep going.
Okay, well, that's great. Was there ever a time that you wanted to give up? And if yes, how did you overcome it?
That's a difficult question. I mean, in terms of my career path, I'm still trying out things. I still haven't made up my mind, but I don't think I'll ever stop advocating for more Muslims to join the Canadian political environment. There's definitely been times where, I've suffered from the imposter syndrome, but then I remind myself that slow progress is still progress. And as long as I'm surrounding myself with like-minded individuals, then the encouragement is going to be there. But then again, if I'm surrounding myself with people who don't really care about what I'm doing, I think that's when this encouragement starts. So again, like I've been using LinkedIn and all kinds of social media to connect with like-minded individuals because I think that's one of the main reasons I would keep going and figure out what I want to do in the future.
Yes, then the need for right friends, the right support systems, the right networks, huge role plays a huge role in our motivations on a regular basis. So no, thanks for sharing this. That's excellent. As we conclude, I have a couple of more questions. One being, since you are involved with politics in some capacity, you are involved, of course, with humanitarian work on the ground. You're also involved in raising awareness about the Arab culture and bringing young Arab community together in Ottawa. I wanted to ask you your thoughts again, and I guess an advice as well for younger friends and generation when it comes to issues of and the role of advocacy, because a lot of people, and just like voting, unfortunately, a lot of people, especially younger people, but I would say it applies to elders equally, unfortunately, in our community, they don't necessarily feel that there is a need for us to lobby or advocate, and that there is that any of those advocacy actions, go anywhere, whether it's signing a petition or protesting or whatever it may be. So I was curious if, first of all, if you have any experience yourself in any of those, any acts of advocacy yourself in the areas that you work in, and secondly, if you have any advice for again our young fellows, especially, why lobbying and advocacy actually matters and makes a difference.
I think looking at precedent examples of organizations who carried out forms of lobbying that actually worked is definitely an encouraging factor. Like seeing what other organizations did and how they succeeded in negotiating with the government over a specific public policy is definitely a good way to start. I haven't really had any like I haven't really participated in any kind of like active advocacy work, just because I'm hoping to work as a political staffer this summer, and like you can't actually do both. Like you either work as a political staffer or you work in, you know, lobbying and advocacy
Mm.
work. So that has been a struggle, like me trying to figure out where I want to go in this. So has definitely convinced me that, you know, it does work. Maybe, you know, if protesting is not going to work, then try out something else. Like don't keep doing the same strategy over and over again. Try out different tactics until something actually works, and get people on board, because it's not a one-person job and it doesn't happen overnight. Like a lot of people assume that one meeting is going to get you know, going to get the policy proposal through, but it's going to be multiple meetings and multiple conversations and a coalition of other organizations in order to get your point across. So if you're working on like a Muslim issue, then get other Muslim organizations on board. Don't just assume that your organization is going to be enough for the job. Get people, if it's a federal issue, get people from all across provinces. And I think that's the great thing. Again, it's a similar example, going back to zero food waste, is that we're a coalition of organizations. We're 4 chapters right now, and I think, you know, we're planning on expanding to more and more provinces. So, you know, the fact that we have that support in different provinces, you know, gives us like a greater voice. And in case of like if we ever want to do advocacy work, we know we have representatives in different regions.
Okay, awesome. Now, just a couple of questions at the end I want to ask you. One is, of course, specifically about zero food waste itself. If somebody wants to get involved with this wonderful work you're doing, what would be the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so they could either email us at ottawa@zerofoodwaste.ca, or if they go to the website, there's like a form like where they could choose the city they'd like to volunteer in. And once they submit it, we receive it right away, and we get in touch with them once we have like the next delivery scheduled.
And the website address is zerofoodwaste.ca, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And the email is there on the screen as well. That's
Perfect.
awesome. Yeah. And I know you talked a little bit about this already when you in the context of activism, but I wanted to just end with top 3 things you would recommend to any young person in Canada who wants to change the world in some way and wants to start volunteering for an organization. What are 3 things you would recommend they do now as they begin their journey?
Yeah, so I think I would recommend seizing every opportunity. Like I've done things you couldn't even imagine. Like I've gone to political offices where I've sat there for like 3 hours and, you know, just put like paper stacks on top of each other. Like sometimes these experiences don't like sound very rewarding, but they are, because, you know, while you're doing that, you might bump into someone who might connect you with someone. So literally anything that comes your way, just take advantage of it and put it there, and build your resume, build your CV. Don't just assume that volunteerism is not going to get you anywhere, because I think it's very rewarding. And you know, community engagement in general is both good for you and the community. Like there's even studies that show that, you know, your happiness levels would increase the more and more you do community engagement. The other part is, again, connecting with like-minded individuals, reaching out to organizations of interest and simply telling them that you're interested in getting on board with them or volunteering with them. And I guess before any of that, figuring out what you like, because again, during my undergrad, I volunteered for a lot of political student organizations. So my focus was there. But you know, somebody else might be into, I don't know, like robotics. So they should be reaching out to the robotics club. So figuring out what you're passionate about and then working towards that goal, even if it's something so simple such as like, you know, as I said, like stacking up papers or anything like that.
Super. Thank you so much. You know, I personally found your conversation today very inspirational, and I hope our many young people and young friends who are watching this show will find it equally inspirational and motivational. So thank you so much, Yasmine, for taking the time out today, sharing your life experience, your story, and very practical advice for anyone, regardless of your age, actually can actually take to heart and actually start practicing. So once again, thank you for your time, and we wish you all the best with the wonderful work you're doing and your future political career, as well as all sorts of leadership experiences that you are aiming for in the future. So thanks once again, Yasmine, for being here.
Thank you for having me. And again, if anyone would like to have a separate conversation, I'm always there. My door is always open because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So I'm still 22, so I have a long way ahead of me. So yeah, I would love to connect with like-minded people.
Awesome. And definitely people can find you on Instagram, I know for sure, and other social media platforms as well. So we look forward to definitely connect with you. Once again, look forward to seeing you in future on our show and other platforms as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. You just heard from a bright, young political activist, a person who is making an amazing difference in her own way as a Canadian Muslim, a Canadian Arab Muslim in the community of Ottawa. We wish her all the best, and I hope we can all learn from her inspirational advice and experiences. With that, we want to thank our wonderful team of producers and production team on Canada Today show. And once again, thank you for watching, and thank you for your ideas all this time. Jazakumullah khairan. You're watching Taha Ghayur on Canada Today, airing on Muslim Network TV. Signing off for this week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.